And so I tried to say, sometimes the diabolical influences can take the form of persistent thoughts. And you just seem to be unable to get away from it. All right. So you want to really understand what the person is going through. Are these dreams? Are there other strange phenomena occurring? What is your relationship to the sacraments? Is the person a believer? Is the person a non-believer? What's their story? Maybe they had some bad experiences with the church or with their family. What's really going on here? So it takes a lot of patience. But sometimes you do come up with people whose behavior is not really what they want. That and then sometimes you say, okay, well, this is sometimes a psychological problem, or even psychological is a very broad word. You could be mentally ill. All right. There are forms of schizophrenia where you're hearing voices, things like that. I've known people with schizophrenia who heard animals talking, you know, like they had this idea that I can hear these animals talking, they would tell me, or things like that, or they have terrible dreams, or they become paranoid. That there's no reason to feel paranoid, but they get there. Or then there are people with bipolar syndrome, where they're 1 minute they're out to conquer the world, and then a few months later they're just crashing, into really profound and terrible depression, things like that. So there are many forms of mental illness. There's autism also, which is a great mystery. Why are so many children autistic, right? And some of the things about autism seem to have to do with the two different sides of the brain, and that maybe the left side of the brain is too activated and the right is not enough activated. So there are many things that one has to take into consideration. So when I was doing this ministry back in the 1990s, people would come here and at first, when you start out with this ministry, there's a certain kind of, awe and even fear as you see people go into these trance states and then begin to behave very violently, and you have to hold them down, three, four, five people, and all kinds of phenomena begin to manifest. But it's also interesting that after you've prayed, maybe for 4, 5, 6 hours over this person, the priest, can be pretty tired after all of that, you know, but the person gets up and it's as if nothing happened. All right. So this person was in some other state, all right, while there was this manifestation of another presence, of an alien will, all right, that was trying to destroy this person. And through prayer, we were able to move that entity away, and the person gets up on their feet, and they're, at least for a little while, they're fine. And sometimes you have to do this over a period of months with the person. But it is interesting how they get up on their feet and they walk out of the sacristy and they're just fine, you know. So you see that and you say there's got to be something going on here. This is not just mental illness. This is not just somebody's unbalanced hormones. There's something else going on here. So that's why we talk about the ministry of exorcism, and why there's a ritual for doing exorcisms. We have the ritual book, and then the approach has to be very, very pastoral and gentle, because you're guiding a human being through a terrible experience, you know. But in some cases, as we know from the lives of the saints, like Saint Pio, Saint Gemma Galgani, and some of the others, that they went through these diabolical vexations as part of the process of transformation, so that they were transformed into saints through that kind of suffering. All right. So if you're working with somebody who's going through this, you have to be aware that, maybe this person is called to a very high level of holiness. So I really need to treat this person with immense respect. So that's why I also started, not only doing the prayers with these people that presented themselves, but I tried to do catechetical teaching. I would try to explain things to them, show them a little bit of a picture of the spiritual life and where they might be going and how they might really develop. So in other words, it's not just a matter of getting rid of the devil. It's really a question of you being the saint that God wanted to make you, you know. And this particular spiritual illness is the way by which you're going to be overcoming some obstacles that you couldn't overcome in any other way. And suddenly, then there's a purpose to it. All right, there's a horizon that is really, I think very helpful for the person going through it. You say, oh, okay, so this is how something's going to change in me. And so it's because it's not like some of the exorcists would go around saying, well, what sin did you commit, that was so bad that, you became possessed by the devil? But that's not really the right question to ask, you know. Some of these people are coming from really bad backgrounds and bad neighborhoods and, really terrible family situations. There's no doubt about it. But very often they're not uh, really committing major sins. I mean, these are not people, committing abortion, let's say, or murder or whatever. I mean, they're very often very, very weak people. Okay, people with a lot of might say psychological gaps, in their life, and they're in a situation which is sometimes unbearable, and yet they're suffering, and as they develop through exorcism and prayer, they become stronger. They become stronger. They begin to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And so you see this kind of change happening. St. Pio wrote to a number of people. They weren't possessed by the devil, but they started out as very psychologically weak and prone to giving up. There was what was her name? Maria Gargani. She was a teacher, and she was constantly being belittled by non-believing colleagues, and she just wanted to give up. And Padre Pio said, no, you're not going to give up. Don't give up. Don't flee the field of battle, but continue fighting. And little by little, with his encouragement, she became a very courageous woman who founded a religious order of nuns who continue to this day to work with young women and accompany them in the stages of life. So I mean, and of course, he was great with reading people's hearts and seeing, what God was calling them to, right? The real vocation, not the vocation of complaining and giving up and, and saying, I can't do it, I'm not up to it, I'm not so great. No, he said, wait a minute now. No, that's not coming from God. That's coming from the other side. All right. You gotta stand up on your own 2 feet and work in the mission that God's giving you. So those stories are really important because this way also we don't forget that even the person who is traumatized and tormented by a demon or more than one demon, also has a destiny to holiness, is being called to holiness. And so the work that we do with people is to help them realize the vocation that God has given them, which goes far beyond the pains and the perplexity of being possessed or traumatized by demons. Okay, it's like that's one step on the journey, but it's not the real journey. It's not the whole story. And so anyway, the rite of exorcism for me is a way that the church has to help people who are, engaged in that kind of spiritual combat, so that when they come out the other side, they are closer to the holiness that God intended for them. All right. I think I hope that's helpful.